April 2, 1865 was a Sunday, and in Richmond, Jefferson Davis was at church. In the midst of the services, a message from the War Department arrived. General Lee telegraphs he can hold his position no longer. Davis quietly left the church and set about removing his government from Richmond. One of the principal concerns of the fleeing Confederate government was the evacuation of the Treasury. Despite months of siege, very little preparation had been made for an orderly evacuation of Richmond. It is interesting to note that, at this point, no proper accounting was made of the Confederate Treasury. This no doubt accounts for the widely varying estimates of its size, which run from $500,000 in gold and silver to well over $20 million. Did large amounts of the treasury make their way into the doomed city? Rumor persists that not all of the treasury made it out on the Great Treasure Train. Local legend asserts that $10 million in gold coins and bullion lent to the Confederacy by Great Britain was buried along the banks of the James River near Berkeley Plantation. Another legend tells of $3 million in gold bullion buried along the banks of the James River about 2 miles south of the city. Whatever the truth of these legends, it is certain that as news of Lee's imminent retreat spread, panic gripped the city. The banks were all open, and depositors stampeded to remove their deposits. The bank directors were equally active in getting their bullion off. Much of the gold taken from the banks was buried or sent elsewhere for safekeeping. By late afternoon, it seemed that all who could leave the city were stampeding. Commissary stores were thrown open, and their hoarded contents distributed to eager crowds. As the day wore on, the scenes at the various government stores changed from the fairly orderly distribution of supplies to rank plundering. Whiskey stocks were broken into and the streets ran with liquor. Factories, arsenals and mills were ordered destroyed. Some were blown up, others were burned. The fires were soon out of control. Captain William H. Parker, of the Confederate Navy, made his way through the crowds, escorting the Confederate treasury. In all, there were 8 wagonloads of barrels, boxes and bags. Gold double eagles, gold ingots, Mexican silver dollars, and silver bricks were packed into railway cars. The great Confederate treasure train was scheduled as the last out of the city. The train first went to Danville, arriving on April 3, 1865. The treasury next moved south by rail to Greensboro, North Carolina. The treasure was now transferred to wagons. There are numerous legends about hundreds of iron cooking pots filled with gold coins being buried by Confederate soldiers along the tracks of the old Southern Railroad between McLeansville and Burlington, North Carolina. It was obvious to most people that the war was over and lost. But the point was not so obvious to Jefferson Davis. Davis believed that if he could slip across the Mississippi River, he could carry on the war almost indefinitely from the vast reaches of Texas. By May 24, Jefferson Davis was under arrest, and the Confederate gold and silver was now deposited in a bank vault in Washington, Georgia, under the protection of the Union Army. On the night of May 25, 5 treasure-laden wagons creaked out of Washington, Georgia, with a small guard of Union troops. The word flashed across northern Georgia. Rebel veterans made plans to seize the wagons. The small caravan camped that night at the home of a Methodist minister named Chenault, near the Savannah River. The Union soldiers drew up the wagons in a defensive circle and posted a guard. Long after midnight, the camp was aroused by curses and shots coming from a large group of riders, thundering down on the wagons. The guards surrendered without a shot. The Confederate veterans tied up the guards and then broke open the boxes and bags in the wagons. Coins spilled to the ground and men waded ankle-deep in gold and silver. The raiders filled their pockets and haversacks. The veterans tied the booty to their saddles and rode off heavily laden. The lion's share of the treasure, however, was never recovered. Reverend Chenault's daughter, Mary Ann Shumate, later told a colorful story of the missing money. There were oceans of money scattered all over Wilkes and Lincoln counties, besides what was carried off. Some of it was hid about in swamps and woods, some was buried in the ground, and there is no telling how much has been forgotten and not found again. Legends persist that much of the loot taken by the raiders is buried near the Chenault home, since the raiders were so burdened down with the heavy metal that they had to hurriedly stop to conceal their ill-gotten gains in order to elude their pursuers. Most legends suggest that the treasure is buried in numerous small hoards around Washington, Georgia, or between Abbeville, South Carolina, and Washington. Some of the treasure may be hidden along the banks of the Savannah River.